If we could turn to the personal for a minute. You write in the book, and I'll quote, "There are times when silence becomes a vise, when a company has no choice but to speak out because it finds its values and reputation suddenly on the line." For you, that issue was DACA. Can you talk a little bit about both your personal experience with that issue and what you did to prepare the airline to respond to it when it became such a politically divisive issue in the first half of the Trump administration?
So the issue was separation of children from their parents. So just on its basic, most human sense, like what person in the world really is supportive of taking a child from their parent, regardless of the circumstances? And I know there's many, but that just was a fundamental break in who we were as a company, which is connecting people and uniting the world. So within a very few minutes, we couldn't allow the government to do that, using their contract with us to separate this. And yes, it was affected by my personal background as an immigrant, undocumented for a period of time in my life. Certainly that was my background, so it does add a little empathy and understanding, but it was not the driving force. It was the concept. It's like, I'm sorry, you're gonna take kids from their parents and take them to detention camps, and you want us to do that?
To transport the children on your aircraft.
And so we not only stopped that at the risk of losing a very large and lucrative contract with the U.S. government and angering the administration, but also went to fly ourselves with another organization. We went to reconnect the kids whenever we could.
Yeah. You also had a lot of up close and personal experience with unions at United, and came together with organized labor at your company in some really interesting moments. What is your advice to CEOs in industries that aren't used to dealing with organized labor but are starting to have to for the first time, whether it's at tech companies like Google or consumer companies like Starbucks? Should they be fighting these efforts, embracing them? Do you think that organized labor ultimately creates a stronger and fairer economy, or one that's less competitive and less efficient and less nimble than it otherwise might be?
Well, that is a broad question with many ramifications. So I will speak to it from a standpoint of, if you have unions or you're taking over an organization that has unions, you should really understand how all of that works. So many people I find that have never been involved in that have their views, have a lot of the comments that you just made, their viewpoints and opinions about that. If you already have them, you have to work with them. They're with you, and you have to make an effort. And a lot of people that aren't part of it, they don't understand, well, they work for me and they should do what I say. That's not really the way it works. They're an organization for a lot of different reasons that's been asked to negotiate their contracts and work with the company in a different way. And so you have to work. You have to honor that contract and work that. And if you try to thwart it, it's going to get crazy. Avoiding contracts or avoiding unions is a tricky subject, because we live in a world today where people can unionize a lot more easily than they could before. And so the best advice as I can is, you begin to hear the rumors, as you begin to hear the slow working of that, manage those issues. Find out, really truly listen to what it is that your own employees are telling you and how best to do that. Because if you don't, the union organizing organization will certainly do that. And they're going to have, they're going to have a louder voice eventually, and then you're going to be faced with decision. You mentioned a couple of companies that face that very nationally. All of a sudden, everybody's looking at you, and you feel like you're oppressing humans and those things. And so the picture that will be painted will be very bleak. So my advice is to really understand the issues that drive some of that emotion in folks, and deal with those facts, and as best as you can manage to correct them. And then by that point, then maybe your employees won't pick a union.
Last question. Walk us into the future a little bit of air travel. You're on the board of Archer Aviation, a startup building electric aircraft that can take off and land vertically. If that and pretty amazing technology takes off, what does it look like for the air traveler to make use of this kind of technology?
Well, for anyone that lives in a large city and has faced the stress of having, I have a flight at X amount of time, and you immediately go to what? It's like, all right, you back up from that time. When do I have to get there, get through security, the traffic to get to the city? And so what this electrical vertical, it's short length, and fully electric, so it has those values. But you can fly from Manhattan to any one of the 3 airports under 10 minutes. And importantly, in the world that we're building at Archer, in a way that's economically feasible. It is not going, it's the cost of an Uber black car.
Not a helicopter.
It is not a helicopter. It's, it's vertical takeoff and then does forward transition thrust to fly. Doesn't fly overly fast, but again, it's in the air and it bypasses all the traffic. So the effective use is in the city, you go to what we call a vertiport, which will be a landing zone somewhere in the city near your neighborhood. You go there, you Uber there, or you drive and park. You climb upstairs. You have a ticket, if you will, and then you're at the airport in a few minutes. That's the most obvious. Of course, it opens up a lot of travel areas. Here in New York, going to the beach in summer we've all been on that highway. It opens up those kind of areas to a lot of folks. And importantly, I think we're building it with the FAA to be safe. It does have a pilot at this point, maybe autonomous in the future, but for now, I think social acceptance of autonomous flying cars would maybe not quite ready for. Some would argue that, but that's the basic promise and the premise of that technology.